Hello Internet, and welcome to my live reaction for March Comes In Like a Lion, chapter 184. That's right, after 3 long months, we are finally back. When we last left our heroes, we sort of continued the Rei-Harunobu match, but really just spent a lot of time in Harunobu's head as he kind of remarked on how Rei has changed, sort of acknowledging that, he is no longer the sort of defined by pain person that he once was, no longer using that pain to fuel him. And Harunobu initially tries to be mad about it, and so he kind of thinks, if I were to be offered the cure to all my illnesses, of course I'd say no. But he can't say that, realizing that, he would jump on that chance. He'd find some other way to get better at shogi, and it's just completely filled with empathy. It's a beautiful chapter. Read it again. It's so fucking good. But with all that, let's jump right on in to chapter 184. And we focus on what looks like the Kawamoto house. Are you sure it's okay, Auntie? And it looks like it's Akari with an air fryer or a stir. The word for it's on the tip of my tongue. It's like a stir pot, something like that. Anyway, Aunt Misaki, I think is her first name. It's fine. Why don't you go ahead and try it out? It's a real modern convenience. An electric pressure cooker! There we go, pressure cooker. If I recall correctly, that pork kakuni with soft-boiled egg marinated in soy and mirin you make is exquisite. 2 small cuts with some bok choy sells like hotcakes, even at a price of 3,000 yen. Kakuni is a type of dish made of pork, cut into cubes, and braised for all of us Americans, or non-Japanese. No matter how cold it is out that day, if you say, I got some good pork belly and I'm cooking up some thick kakuni on Line Messenger, and we see these guys running to Misaki's shop, wah! Kakuni! Soft-boiled to egg! Guys will rush over by taxi and order it up with some expensive alcohol. But the issue is the feeling of high tension when preparing. This is Misaki's line. But the issue is the feeling of high tension when preparing it. No matter how many times you tell yourself, this is a product people buy and use all the time. Nothing is going to go wrong. You can never quite defeat that nagging feeling of, what if it explodes? And we see this image of her with maybe the cooker in the image is not an electric pressure cooker, and that's kind of her point, that the electric pressure cooker isn't going to explode. Maybe, I don't know, this is largely irrelevant. But there was that one time when things got really scary. And Akari thinks to it, yes, that was back when I'd accidentally broken a vase and was in a panic to clean it up. And as she's cleaning the vase, Misaki tells her, yeah, Akari, the pot, oh dear. And we see the pressure rising, the pot's kind of clanging under the pressure. Yeah! Back then, if Serizawa-sama hadn't happened to be stopping by, Serizawa, the Shogi Club president, I think, doesn't quite look like him, but he also kind of does look like him. I don't quite remember his name. You two, get behind the sofa. And you see he has this, using a tray as a shield as he approaches the pot. Why don't you try using an electric pressure cooker? My wife uses one. She said those aren't scary at all. This one definitely wouldn't explode either, I'm quite sure. So that was not the electric version, right? Because we can see it on the stove. Okay. And Misaki is sort of panicking, yes, we will. We're sorry. Thank you so much, Serizawa-sama. And then we see Akari back in the present reading over this cooking book. Bring to a boil for 15 minutes, then add the flavoring and cook for another 10 minutes. Added heat is all done through electricity. Besides that, it looks like the procedure is more or less the same as an analog pressure cooker. Cut 2 deboned pork ribs in half, then thinly slice the green parts of spring onions and ginger, and add it in order to erase the meat smell. Then add enough water to cover the ingredients. And do a pressure cook for 15 minutes. This is very quickly turning into the kind of chapter that I just don't really come to this manga for. I've talked about in the past, where there sometimes we'll get really deep into cooking instructions, and it's I'm not it's not the kind of thing that completely turns me off the series. It's the kind of thing that I know what I'm kind of getting into with this series, that sometimes we'll have a chapter that's just the Kawamotos talk about cooking for 10 pages, which is very much what this seems to be. But after the absolute high watermark of last chapter, it's a little disappointing to get this, especially after a 3-month hiatus. But whatever, what can you do? Do a pressure cook for 15 minutes. And the two of them, and we see they've like set the timer and everything. We see Misaki and Akari looking at it. Okay, here it goes. The pressure is up. And there's this click sound. Wait until it cools down a little, and the pin goes all the way down. We see the pin like the lid. And that eventually happens, and they open it up, and Akari, I think, kind of presses down on the meat in the cooker. Ah! It's soft! Really soft! You throw out the original onions, ginger, and broth. Then you cut the meat into a size you'd like to eat them at. Then add ginger, water, alcohol, and sweet soy sauce all together. And then put it on with the seasonings for 10 minutes. We see 10 minutes later, and they're eating. It's so tasty! It's just as soft as it is with analog. If we take the cover off and boil it down, the broth will be even thicker. And it'll stop on its own, even if we take our eyes off it. We don't need to worry about fire. It's safe! And then they just keep going on. How about we test some other things? For that explosion of softness, we see a furofuki daikon, a simmered Japanese radish with sweet miso, and beef tendon stew. For that explosion of softness, we could charge 1,500 yen a plate. We can boil beef tendon with salty sweet sauce for even more, and eat it with curry. I read that wrong. It's soft stewed beef tendon. The small bowl could go for 1,800 yen. And then we can boil beef tendon with salty sweet sauce even more and eat it with curry. I think that's what that arrow means there. It's just a lot of food discussions. What is this? The super exquisite taste, just what is it? Akari, are you a genius? Akari's pressure cooker dishes became a big hit. And we see back at the shop, do you have the beef tendon today? Do you think you could get 4 servings of it for me? This kakuni is so good. Akari-chan, do you think I could have just one more plate? One with lots of fat on it. Huh? A lot of awful stew? You can make some more, right? People are really getting into this. And it's really just, I don't know what's, like, my one concern is that the fact that we're cutting away from the match, and this seems to be a chapter where some degree of time passes, right? Akari and Misaki get the pressure cooker, they bring it to the store, and it becomes a big hit. I'm worried that, like, the first scene is meant to be at the same time as the match with Harunobu, and now we're, like, some weeks later, and we just missed all that. I don't think that's the case. That'd be very bad on Umino's part, and she's just not a bad writer. But I'd be disappointed, to say the least. Anyway, we see this guy, beef tendon is just the best. This gives me a hankering for some white rice. And Misaki kind of goes, huh? White rice? Well, white rice would be a bit. We don't. Bar Misaki isn't a set meal restaurant. And this other guy apologizes. Misaki-san, my apologies. I just really like to eat some now. I just can't take it. I'll get an Uber if I have to. Okay, here's a question. Complete random, nothing to do with anything. But the story, I think, like the manga came out in 2007 when it started, right? And it's been at most 2.5 to 3 years in universe since it started. I don't think Uber was a thing in 2010, right? I'll check real fast if I'm right about when the manga came out. But I'm pretty sure it was like 2007 or something. Let's see. Yep, July of 2007. And so it was just kind of odd that they have Uber. It's I guess one of those things I shouldn't really think too hard about. It's definitely like I'm pretty sure it's a continuity error, but it's not a big deal. White rice, hurry, give me some white rice! Then Akari calls out, there's trouble, Auntie. We have all 3 cookers in full operation, but we might not make it in time. And we see they got 2 more of them. Misaki tells her, it's fine, just focus on the kakuni. And then, after a week's time, see, we're literally a week later, and we see Misaki comes to the bar. Good morning, Auntie. The meat is on standby mode. I guess Akari's already there. And then Auntie's heart finally gave way. And she, like, I didn't mention this earlier, but we see the bar on the top of page 7 sort of has this vibe of, like, it's very sort of European is the vibe it gives me. Like, the brick walls, the sort of, like, medieval sort of, like, oval doorways. And she collapses on this very kind of Victorian couch. And then Auntie's heart finally gave way. Auntie, my dream castle is filled with the smell of kakuni and offal. And Misaki tells her, I'm sorry, Akari. I want to go back to being a regular bar. You can take the pressure cookers for people eating in at Miyazuki-do. There's just too much meat at this bar. There'll be presents for you when it opens. And Akari kind of blushes. My own shop? Now that you mention it, that would be so lovely. Yes, absolutely. I'd love to sell things like that. I forget, we talked about the second shop a good deal. I forget if it was just going, if they were like, did they mention that they'd be selling something different at the second shop? I don't quite remember. They might have talked about that. Under big red bangasas in the garden, I can have a bunch of electric pots laid out, filled with piping hot offal stew, soft tender kakuni, and salty sweet beef tendon, so people can eat them whenever they want. And of course, on the veranda, there'll be a huge rice cooker. It'll be a huge thing, like the breakfast venue at a ryokan. We have a translator note, a bangasa is a traditional type of Japanese umbrella, which you can see in the panel there, made of coarse oil paper, and a ryokan is a traditional Japanese inn. And then Akari goes on, then anyone can get piping hot white rice at any time. Huh? And then she stops. Hold on a minute. Auntie? What's wrong, Akari? Hina and my new Mikazuki-do is a sweets shop. And then Misaki's like, right, this won't work there either. To be continued. We do get, though, an ad for Volume 16, or at least what looks to be the cover of Volume 16 is Rei helping Hina with her scarf, which I believe happened during the New Year's arc. Let's think about this unpredictable life together. Let's walk through it together. This actually might be the meant to be the cover page. Chapter 184. And then we have our scan later page at the end. Okay, so yeah, this was a chapter where nothing really happened. I don't have a lot to say about this chapter at all. It's about it's like, you know, I call this sort of content my least favorite part of March, where it's just about food or whatever, and there's no real, you know, emotional weight, and the comedy is not really there. It feels more like a cookbook than anything else. But, like, it's one of those things that's not actively bad, it's just kind of boring, and I've been waiting 3 months for more March content, and I'm very disappointed that this is all we got. But that's a far cry from being, like I'm not worried about the future of March. Unless this happened, like, after... Unless we're now, like timeline-wise, after the Rei Harunobu match, which would be really, really bad writing, and I really hope that's not what happened. And I don't think that's what happened. But I can't help being nervous sometimes. Y'all know. But yeah, I'm trying to find something to say about this chapter for the retrospective part of the video, and I really just don't got anything to say. It's food. It's it's a pressure cooker that ended up just not really, like, it doesn't even become a part of the new Mikazuki-do because it's a sweets shop and there's no point in that at all. It's just sort of a filler chapter, which is really weird. Like, it's weirdly placed, being in the middle of this big match between Rei and Harunobu. It's weirdly, like, not fluff, and that, like, it's just warm, feel-good stuff, but fluff in that, like, it's kind of filler. As much as I don't like using that term, filler, especially in a manga, it's kind of is just filler. And I'm glad we're only 2 weeks away from the next issue, because that would be a very disappointing thing to leave us on for, like, 3 more months. But yeah, I'm just not really feeling this chapter. It's just kind of there. It's not actively bad, but it's certainly not any good either. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it in general. It's a chapter, it happened, it was 10 pages, and let's get back to that shogi match, because that's where those emotional high points are. So yeah, I'm going to leave this video off here. Hope you all enjoyed the chapter and the video itself. If you did, feel free to drop me a like or subscribe. You know, do whatever makes you happy, you know? And remember, your life is your own, okay? Bye!